Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counter Clipping show number 138 for August 28th, 2023. I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight. Our topic is a publisher highlight of 3W Worldwide Wargames. This has been overdue a bit in that several people have suggested this. And I do think 3W is an interesting subject, so we should have some decent discussion of that. And I don't have that many 3W games, but I don't have zero either, and a few more have passed through my hands over the years. So first of all, I don't have any news, but I got news. You know what I'm saying? So before we get started, please like the video if you are new here or haven't liked it yet, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. We're closing in on 7,000 subscribers. And remember that when we do hit that, which might be next week, there will be a very special giveaway. So that it's either going to probably be next week or the week after, barring some complete collapse of incoming channel subscriptions. So I got like some channel business to talk about. But I'll also mention, first of all, we put up the ticker, which I actually did update. You might notice a slightly different look this week, and that's kind of an ongoing project. I want to give a big shout out to, first of all, Eric Norin, who is our new swordsman level patron. So thank you, Eric. The support is much appreciated. Super chats and super stickers are on for everybody who's here tonight. That is a great way to support the channel and to get your comment highlighted, because I might otherwise miss it because we already have 86 people. That's a thing that you can do, and there's links to support the channel in the video description and the merch store and the Patreon and all that other stuff. So check that out if you haven't already. Again, the support is much appreciated. Something I didn't think I was ever going to have to say occurred this week, in that my heavy duty Oregon laminations counter clipper broke. It's just the spring. I can get a new spring, but I have not done that yet. So what is probably going to happen is I'm going to take the spring off the 3mm clipper. But in the meantime, we are clipping Battles in the East Volume 1, which is 5/8" counters, so I can use the 2.5mm clipper, which, despite the abuse heaped upon it by the TSA, is still working just fine. So that is one thing. I mean, this spring was bad. I probably had that thing for 7 or 8 years, maybe not quite that long, but it's been a long time. And I would estimate that there's well over 100,000 counters that have been clipped with that thing, and the spring literally disintegrated. So I do want to give, before we get too far into this, I want to talk about, the general channel business. Due to scheduling problems, we did not play last Blitzkrieg last week either, even though I was up to play. After having missed the previous 2 weeks with COVID. Well, we're still clipping. I have told the story, Paulson, and check out the brand new channel highlights. This is a non-StreamYard function. I'm just going to mention that. And I'm slowly working my way around to that part of the story. So hopefully we will resume last Blitzkrieg this week. I want to hide this stuff over here because, with stuff that is upcoming, I'm going to mention John C. from the sunny Philippines. I'm going to mention that I've been doing like a bunch of back end stuff on the stream. And on the general sort of setup in OBS. Now, you might recall that a couple of months ago, I picked up a new computer, and I pretty much did the absolute minimum setup in OBS, which is the software that I use to capture video, which then feeds to StreamYard. You don't have to do it that way. You can just use StreamYard on the webcam, but you have a lot more ability to customize the stream if you use OBS for this. This is an open source platform. There are proprietary things you can use too. So the big shout out is, I want to give a big shout out to Mike from My Own Worst Enemy, who was kind enough to send me a Stream Deck. It's the 15-key Stream Deck, and it has, honestly, I took it out of the box and looked at it, and it has sat here, like right here, for several months, and I just haven't had the time or the chance to fiddle with it. So I finally fixed that over the weekend, and we are now on the Stream Deck, so we can do all kinds of fancy things like this, and there's a be right back screen, and it's all kind of neat little things that we can do, and I can even trigger the outro. So I'm eventually going to be moving away from StreamYard. Now, what that means for the show, and I'm using some Stream Deck integrations as well. Let me pull up the chat to say hello to everybody before we get any further with this. So let's give a big shout out to Alan Salazar, Alistair Logie, Bayonet Brandt from the Armchair Dragoons, Bill Thornton, Chet Bell, Christopher Smith, Daniel Silverthorne, David Zell, Eric Goebel, Gary McClellan, the legend himself, Fucko is here, Jason W. Somebody else just popped in. Alistair Logie is here, Jeff Peeler, Jeff Taylor, Jeffrey Wesovich, Jeffrey Edwards, Joe Perez, John C. from the sunny Philippines, Carl Crater from the Wargame Boot Camp, Lee Grant, Meandering Mike, Neil Badkeef, Paul Sin, Perry Spiropoulos, Peter Scheif, Scott Bell, Stacking Limit is here. Stigler is in the house. Stuka Joe is here. Joe, thanks for stopping by. The One True Phlegm, Thomas Bandy, Tim Greenhaw, William Aarons are all here. And I have missed, I'm positive, a whole bunch of people because we got like this weird integration thing happening that it's mostly set up. I have not yet gotten the ticker to work with OBS yet. It will be easier to manage the entire thing through OBS. So what this will mean is that once I am ready to run the entire show through OBS, not the Thursday stream, that's with Dan. We're going to continue to use StreamYard for that and for any, interviewee type things that we do. And we do have an interview planned with Grant Dalglish of Columbia Games coming up too in the next couple of weeks. I have an actual date on that. I actually think it's late September. So we are not going to be multi-streaming anymore on this show, which means that if you watch the show on Twitch or Facebook, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to see a link instead that will direct you over here to YouTube to watch the show. That is a cleaner way to do it. And as Stuka Joe has mentioned, you mentioned Stream Deck. Stream Deck integrates perfectly with, yeah. So it's that part of it's actually built right in. You don't even need to install anything. That said, there's like a ton of installs that you can do to optimize your Stream Deck setup, and it's pretty cool device actually. They're fairly pricey. So Dan the Dancing Man, Dan the Dan Noodles Man, the Harvey. I almost called him Harvey Weinstein. And that would be a bridge too far, I think. John C. from the sunny Philippines. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. The support is always appreciated. Look at that. This is fancy as hell. This is a plugin for OBS called Chat Ninja, which I have never used before. And it's a bit fiddly to set up, but it's pretty neat. So I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And that even tells me up at the top that is a stream I forget what it's called. There's some other third-party platform that I'm using as well. So Joe's using or has some experience with Chat Ninja as well. So good to hear. It's pretty neat. It was a little bit fiddly to set up, but it wasn't crazy fiddly to set up. So I'm just as happy with that. So I am able to monitor all of these, all the comments, and I think only from YouTube, not from Twitch or Facebook. But nobody watches on Twitch or Facebook, so what's the point, right? I'll usually get like one person, and I'm sorry, one person. We're just going to stick with this show. Now, all that said, there's a reason I have gone to all this legwork to set OBS up to be able to stream competently. And that is that Starfield comes out on Thursday at 8 p.m. So basically, immediately after the show, we have Mike Nagel on this week from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern. I am hopping into Starfield and probably will play for, my guess is 3 or 4 hours on Thursday night, and then after work on Friday, and then we have a long weekend, which couldn't possibly have been timed better. I think this is a bit strained. I don't have I have a little less capability confidence in the flexibility of OCS. But it is it is a great tool. It is free. It is, I wouldn't say it's 100% stable, but it isn't terribly flaky either. So I've even bought a special ass cushion to sit on for long periods of time. Um, so Alistair Logie asked if I bought a monster PC for Starfield, and I wouldn't call it a monster, but it's pretty good. It is a well, hell, I'll tell you. Um, let's tell you exactly what I got. I got 32 gigs of RAM, which is pretty good. This is Windows 11, and it is an i7. And with this particular generation of i7s, there are issues apparently with running 4 sticks of RAM at a time, and 32 gig sticks are really hard to find. So I'm basically stuck with 2 sticks, even though there's 4 slots on the motherboard, at least until that gets fixed, which is presumably a firmware update. So I started a poll on the channel today. Go vote in that poll if you haven't yet. So as you might be aware, I have a Ardwulf digital channel for video game content, and I think it's been over a year since I've actually posted anything to it. So it is not vigorously active, as we say. Um, yes, Brant, but I plan to be playing Starfield while on the show with you. So to be blunt, so sorry, I might be slightly distracted. So um, so yes, as has been mentioned a couple of times here. The preload is the previous day, so it should be fine. Now, the last launch day game I bought, I want to say, was Skyrim, okay, which was now 13, 12, 12 years ago at this point. So I do not have fiber here. I keep getting these solicitations both through email and through the mail, like the physical mail from Frontier. Sign up for fiber, and then I call them, and they're like, "Yes, there's no fiber in your area." So I am amenable to the suggestion of getting fiber, but we have no fiber available at this moment, at this exact time. So yes, I could absolutely do 60 FPS at 1080p on fiber, and actually, it's not that crazy even given the current bandwidth. Another cool thing that I can do here is I can actually there's an add-in for the Stream Deck that it will actually run a speed check, and will tell me what the upstream and downstream bandwidth is. That's damn handy. Frontier Internet, not Frontier Studios, the game people. That's the Elite Dangerous / Dinosaur Coaster Planet or whatever the fuck else they do. I will mention this is there's a couple of pieces of news here, and Joe Perez. I just saw this literally pulling emails out right before the show. The next Lavatai title from Marshall Enterprises will be Lavatai de Ekmol. That is a very interesting and pretty important battle. So that's going to be very interesting. They will have it. I think they said they're demoing it or playtesting it at Consum World Expo, which of course I am not at. So my friends at Consum World Expo, thank you for sharing your photos and stuff, but I am of course slightly jealous. And the other news is that there is the digital version of the venerable classic War and Peace, which has just been released into what sounds like early access on Steam. So that is worth a look as well. It sounds like they don't have all the scenarios integrated yet, which is unfortunate, but they're still working on it, so that's fine. So that's pretty cool. So Carl got a new graphics card, NVIDIA GeForce 2080 Ti. That meets the 2080. I think meets the recommended spec, and the 2080 Ti should be a little bit better. So you should be okay. The i5 8400 should be fine, I would think. Ekmul Perispropolis. Ekmul is one of the lesser known Napoleonic battles. But you could just ask Jim Ozarski; he'll tell you how important it was. It's a pretty important battle, actually. Mark Hodgkinson, hello from Brisbane. Um, and I hope John Longshore is okay. I haven't seen him on earlier. So Starfield. I don't want to derail the show too much talking about this, but so I can get this out. This is the important part. We will be live streaming it, and that is scheduled for Friday at 6 p.m. And if people actually watch, and it doesn't have to be a million people or even 123 people that we have here tonight, I have like 5 people, I will keep doing it on a periodic basis, like every couple of days until I get sick of doing it. That's going to happen on Twitch, thanks to the Twitch terms of service changes that happened earlier this year, a couple of months ago. They changed the terms of service such that you are not able to, or you're not supposed to, live stream on any other destinations other than Twitch. Used to be that only applied to Twitch affiliates and partners. Now it applies to everybody. That Twitch, that's lame. Stop doing that. But I'm not gonna break the rules on purpose. So we're not streaming on Twitch tonight, but we will be streaming Starfield on Twitch on Friday. So if you want to check that out, I'll make sure that a post gets posted in the feed here and on all the social media things and all that stuff, so that people know where to go find it. But it's twitch.tv/Ardwulf. And we'll probably go for 2 to 3 to 4 hours or so. I don't know, something like that until I get sick of it. So what Starfield it's a Bethesda RPG. So if you think of it as Skyrim in space, I think that's reductive and maybe less informative than you might think, but it's not entirely inaccurate either. Now I have an i7, 13th gen i7 13700KF with 24 cores, 3.4 gigahertz base speed. I have 32 gigs of RAM, and I have a GeForce RTX 4070. So I am reasonably confident that I'm going to be okay. An early buzz is that it's running pretty well, which would be unusual for a Bethesda game on release. Launch day of Skyrim on 11. It's an easy date to remember, 11/11/11, because they tried to do that with Starfield 2. It was pretty shaky. There was like a day one patch. Marty is talking about Winter's Victory. I'm very much looking forward to this as well. The other thing that we're going to eventually be able to do here is we're going to actually be able to put the chat on the screen with me, and that'll be great. That'll help everybody out, and it will make it harder for me to miss stuff. So, but I haven't quite gotten that done yet. So we'll get it done at some point, and then I won't need to highlight stuff anymore either. So that'll be cool. So interestingly, William Boardman mentions Cyberpunk 2077. So that came out last year or the year before, something like that. It launched really, really shaky. Now, interestingly, I got to kind of make some test runs, and I've done a couple pretty short test streams over on Twitch, just to kind of get fiddle with things and make sure this thing's working. I actually was doing Cyberpunk 2077 to do that, and I picked it up some time ago on sale. It was on sale at a pretty good discount, and I think it's pretty good. However, it is, and it's allegedly it's improved a lot since it released, but it is still kind of janky, and that's okay. Up to a point. There are some interface issues that I think are poor choices in the interface design, and there are, but like the combat and the shooting and all that feels good. The AI is dumb. Invariably, what happens is you get in a fight, and unless you're fighting with the cops, the enemies just charge you and try to melee you, and I'm using a shotgun. Shotgun in the face, generally 1 or 2 shots, basically anybody that I've encountered so far, other than the bosses, which are also super, super dumb and tend to get hung up on nearby crates and beams and shit like that. So taking them out has not exactly been a giant challenge either. And it looks great. And I guess the main story is pretty cool too, from what I understand. So there's a big expansion coming out for Cyberpunk called Phantom Liberty, which is going to revamp a lot of the game's systems. And I don't know that it will fix the graphical glitches, but it is almost like a soft reboot feeling things. So, I was at Best Buy. So, in preparation for all this, I broke my headset. I don't know if this happened before the show last week. I'm not sure if I remember to mention it or not. But my headset broke. I had a HyperX Cloud Wireless or Cloud 2 Wireless. I really liked it, but it did get dropped a bunch of times. And I apparently it dropped one too many times, and the plastic part that holds the metal part together broke, and I was holding it together with electrical tape. That was not going to work, so uh, I went and bought a new headset. While I was out buying the new headset, I bought a new keyboard, so I don't have to use the shitty Razer keyboard anymore. I don't like Razer hardware. I think their software is garbage too. So I got a not incredibly high-end Logitech mechanical backlit keyboard. It's not doesn't have RGB or any of that fancy stuff. It was only like $65. And I bought a new mouse, which is the same as the old mouse. Actually, it's the well, that wasn't supposed to happen. Logitech G502. I clicked the side button on the mouse as I picked it up, and that's what did that. Spare Rib. First of all, welcome to the show. There we go. There we go. So I'd like to do playthrough of a whole pile of things, and Battles in the East is possible. Um, so I'm not promising anything at this point, but it is possible. So the new headset is HyperX. It's just the next model up, and the new mouse is the exact same mouse I had before and bought 7 years ago, and it's basically the same mouse except it now costs $35 instead of like $100. It doesn't have the cloth cord, but the cloth my honestly Logitech's cloth cords are bullshit anyway. Um, so Battles in the East is what we're clipping right now. That is why that is there. So, and it looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. So the I did not close Discord. That's going to be irritating, but it's okay. Um, I'm not really impressed with them in terms of a value for money proposition. I don't think their hardware is really any better than anybody else's. And their drivers are, I think, a little bit suspect. And their software that runs everything is not as good as Logitech's, bluntly. There's a really cool feature on the Logitech keyboard called gaming mode. And in the Logitech software, I can decide exactly what gaming mode does. So I can decide, for example, that gaming mode disables the Windows key, the tilde key, and caps lock. I accidentally trigger caps lock constantly. It's super irritating. I really hate it. So to me, not having that feature on the Razer keyboard, now I can go into the software and disable the key, but I'd sometimes want to use it. I like having a key on there where I can, okay, I need to use caps lock for a couple minutes. Here we go. You can also disable it using the registry, but that's a pain in the ass. And I don't want to do that. And frankly, if you don't know what you're doing, and I kind of do, but I don't want to make needless registry changes. So I have no, okay. So to badmouth Logitech, I at one point had a wireless Logitech headset that was absolute garbage. So it is not that Logitech is great and Razer is terrible. It's that specific things from Logitech are good and presumably specific things from Razer are good. It's just that I didn't have any of those things. Now, the Black Widow V3, which was the keyboard I had, felt really good. And it was one of those kind of flat platen keyboards where the keys are all raised up on it, and that makes it a little bit easier to um, clean. And that's an attractive feature, but not as attractive as having the gaming mode, which I use for all kinds of non-gaming applications. That's just for me, that and a volume knob on the keyboard is like those are must-have features. So anyway, I'm generally speaking like what I have seen of the HyperX stuff too, but I've never had anything from them that's not a um headphones. They tried to sell me some Sennheiser headphones, but they're the ones that you'd want are quite expensive. Those are the super duper high end headphones. Not what I got. I am perfectly happy with my wireless headphones, and my requirement on the headphones is they must be wireless. Because when I had wired headphones, I would turn around and the headphones would get jacked off my head and they'd come crashing to the ground. And it's a miracle those things lasted as well as they did. So yeah, studio quality is going to be wasted on me. So I'm sure they sound great, but they probably will kill my bank account, which is already not in as great a shape as I would like. So anyway, this Logitech keyboard is mechanical. I prefer a mechanical keyboard for reasons that I shouldn't even really have to explain. They just feel better. But I don't necessarily insist on a mechanical keyboard as long as it's not like a chiclet keyboard or something, not some kind of nonsense like that. It should be fine. I'm going to turn this light on quick to try and identify the colors on these counters. There we go. We're back to black. All right. So, well, we usually get a good 20 minutes of nonsense at the beginning of the show anyway. So this is, this is par for the course, right? Sorry about that, but people still listen anyway, and we still have 137 people watching. So, no, not too many people have been chased off by this. We will get to 3W momentarily. So, these are becoming highly. So I forget the actual model number on this. These old IBM mechanical keyboards are like super highly sought after nowadays, actually, for this exact reason. And of course, they're built like tanks, so they're basically all still working. From what Marty was saying, I'm not going to try and find it in the chat, but from what Marty was saying, it sounds like Winter's victory is getting pretty close. They're just waiting to print the rule books. Any time would be great. But if it takes a little extra time, it takes a little extra time. It's not like I'm not going to have anything to do in the meantime. Christopher Smith asked, what is a mechanical keyboard? That basically means that you have an actual mechanical switch under each key. And most people feel that they feel better. They're not necessarily more responsive, and they can be really loud. But the keyboard I bought has cherry reds, I think, and I don't know if I forget. Maybe that's not it, but it's pretty quiet. So it's not like one of those super loud, clacky mechanical keyboards. Marty, are you even coming to Origins? Because that'd be cool if you work. That would be cool. And by all means, bring Winter's victory with you. I think I'm going to pull this up just a hair. There we go. I think that looks a little better. Okay, so we got all this stuff set up. Anyway, in any event, John Longshore, welcome back. Thanks for coming by. All right, so 3W. So what I didn't track down was what 3W's first game was. So I don't know what that was. However, 3W Worldwide Wargames was founded by Keith Poulter as early as 1977. That's the date that I came up with. That is super duper early. And earlier than I thought. And a lot of the stuff that I think of when I think of 3W is stuff from the 80s. And in fact, the heyday of 3W while it was around, is one of the most important wargaming companies. They're the publisher of strategy and tactics between 1987 and 1990. In 1990, they sell S&T to Decision Games, and I will point out that Decision has been the publisher of S&T magazine for more years than everybody else combined. If you put SPI, TSR, and 3W all in one bin. And that I think is somewhat noteworthy in and of itself. Brant, I did not get in on the Fighting Fantasy reboot campaign, although I was aware of it. I wasn't that big a fan of Fighting Fantasy back in the day, so I don't have maybe a little nostalgia for it because I did see some of that. But not enough that I was going to go back a campaign at this delicate time. So no, this is 3M. Remember, they made, as we mentioned, I believe last week, they made games too, surprising basically everybody until they sold off their game division to Avalon Hill back in the early 70s or something like that. So Keith Poulter is the main person at 3W basically the entire time. He is editor of S&T for a while. During 3W's governorship of S&T, Keith Poulter is editor for a while. Ty Bomba is editor for a while. And then for a while, Jim Dunnigan actually comes back. And I actually have one of those issues where Dunnigan has come back to editorship of S&T. So they're a pretty interesting company, but remember that the 80s are, if there's a dark ages of wargaming, it's basically the 80s and 90s. Okay, this is a time when GMT has not even been founded yet, and MMP has not been founded yet. And Decision, I'm not sure when Decision gets founded, but they're certainly not very prominent at that point until they take over S&T. And GDW, while they're still doing stuff, they're really not doing very much in the way of wargaming at this point. So let me, we get to screw that up, and the ticker just ain't working. Well, the ticker in StreamYard works fine. The ticker in OBS, I'm still working on it. It like comes in super low res for some friggin' reason, and I don't know why. We are, by the way, drinking Ardbeg Wee Beastie. I would say we'll be finishing it next week at the current pace. Like I said before, it's not terrible. It's just a bit boring. So I'm thinking I'm going to call Oregon Laminations and ask them if they have the specs on what exact spring I need to get to replace that, and they may be able to sell me one, and that'd be fine. But I could also go to Granger, McMaster Car, or whoever. Christopher Smith, to answer this question, yes, it is our intention. We haven't set it up yet, but it is our intention to reschedule for Ty. Victory Games runs from 83 to maybe 95, but Victory Games is really an appendage of Avalon Hill, right? The only probably the only other major wargame publisher in that era is Avalon Hill, which of course is still trucking along at that point. But again, as Jason W mentions, GCACW does come out in that period, but it's from Avalon Hill, right? So non-Avalon Hill alternatives are thin on the ground during this period. The point, however, isn't to say that there's nobody doing war games anymore, because there is. The point to say is that in this period, 3W is one of the most prominent war game companies, regardless of whether you think their output was good or bad or whatever. And I would argue that it was both. A lot of their games, if you look at like the list, a lot of their games did come out in the context of the magazines. And bearing that is the case, magazine games have always been somewhat inconsistent in quality. There's been plenty of good ones, but there's been plenty of bad ones too. HMS GRD absolutely was around at that time. They had taken over Europa. mid to late 80s. I want to say around. I forget exactly when, but they had done 92 or 93. They did Second Front, maybe 94, maybe 95. But that wasn't the first thing that they did. They had done First to Fight before that, for one thing. As Spare Rib mentions, a lot of 3W's games were underdeveloped. I think this is true. Some of that can be chalked up to the magazine. GDW does not go away until 1997. I believe that's the correct date. But at that point, they're a publisher that happens to do war games from time to time, rather than a war game publisher. They are no longer one of the mainstays of the wargaming publishing scene as they were in the 70s and I guess early 80s. They are, however, still around till something like 97. So, um, quantity has a quality all its own. You're always safe quoting Stalin, remember. Um, there's a lot of this stuff. They did a lot of games, and a lot of them can be had for fairly reasonable prices nowadays. And a bunch of them are, there's some good ones, some good looking ones in there too, right? World in Flames did come out in the 80s. I am not sure how prominent World in Flames was in its first edition or two, however. I had no contact with anybody who had any experience with WIF prior to at least third edition at the earliest. And when I started playing, it was the fourth edition. But yeah, 3GDW is still around, and they continued doing war games basically the entire time. But that was no longer their mainstay of publication. They had a number of different product lines, mostly RPG product lines, and a few other things as well. And I think we're on the wrong OBS profile, but I guess it doesn't matter too much since we're not doing it wrong. Um, for the purposes of this, until I completely move over to OBS, we're still hybriding this in StreamYard at the moment, and I'm controlling most stuff through StreamYard. Well, I'm running the stream through StreamYard. I'm actually controlling most stuff through OBS at this point. So, all right. So moving on. First of all, let's do a scene transition, and then go piss. I got to do this again. I had this all set up, and then I screwed it up by hopping out. There we go. All right. We're going to first of all start with their highest rated game, Modern Naval Battles. Now, there was a not Modern Naval Battles 2 and 3 as well. And, for whatever value the BGG rating system has at all, let alone for war games, this is their highest rated game, more so than Modern Naval Battles 2, which I seem to find a lot of. So this appears to be a card game. I never played this, but it's a card game. And it's probably fairly fun. Designers credited here on BGG. I obviously do not have a copy to look at this. This meandering. This is a fair boy. I think there's people that do actually. As meandering boy, the chat's coming in so fast I'm having trouble doing the clicking here. All right, let's not do that. That's why that's not working. All right, as Marty mentions here, 6.5 is their highest rated game. To be honest, this is higher than I expected it to be. If you look at the war game ranking at 1117, that's a little higher than I expected it to be. A lot of these games are pretty obscure nowadays. This was definitely popular enough that they have they did 3 of them, right? So it couldn't have been a complete bomb. And I believe that Mo could be in any number of places. You notice how it looks different now. Now we're doing this in StreamYard because I'm sharing the screen here. I didn't set this. I could have set this up with OBS, but I didn't. And actually would have worked better had I done so. Anyway, Moving on from modern naval battles, about which I don't have much to say other than to observe that there are two expansions to this thing as well. And apparently, Dan Verson, later of Dan Verson Games, was involved in the design along with Beth Queeman, whose name rings a bell, and who has two design credits according to this: Tank Commander 2008, collectible card war game published by Critical Hit. Holy crap! I had no idea. Okay, so I don't know what's up with that. We will get to Royalists and Roundheads because I feel like it was one of their more prominent titles. Moving on from Tank Commander, however, we move on to Ancients. Now, there's I'm a bit unclear as to whether these all collectively represent a series of games or if there are merely three or four different titles from 3W. This is not the 3W cover, called Ancients. This is a William L. Banks design, and if you've seen this cover, this is the cover of 3W's Ancients, and it's unfortunate that we don't have a better shot of this on BGG because I actually think this is kind of a neat cover. And while I don't know, I don't know that I would unqualitate, I don't know that I love the graphics, the covers, I should say, that 3W had. I think their interiors are workmanlike, for the most part. This is a pretty striking cover, I think. It's this sort of ancient's mask from some ancient's culture, presumably. I don't know. Um, yes, but there's an ancients. There's another game called Ancients from 3W, and I don't know that they're related at all. That is the confusing thing. Now, does BGG list helpfully list a like re-implemented by Ancient Battles Deluxe, Ancients 1, Ancients 2? Okay, so presumably these are related. Ancient Battles Deluxe from Guts to Gunpowder. This was put out by Victory Point Games. Ancients 1, this may be the one you're thinking of. And this is, I think, also a pretty good cover. At least the art's good. And then Ancients 2 here, which again is a definitely unified look to these. And Jason W says that Ancients is Ancients 1 and Ancients 2 in one box, which makes sense. And each of these are battle games. It appears to be an attempt to do a pretty generic Ancients warfare system. So Ancients 2 here, for example, contains 35 scenarios. And then Ancients 1 has another 32 scenarios. So I don't know whether this is any good or not. By 3W standards, it's relatively highly rated. This is I think a fair statement, Joe Perez, who says that the Ancients box cover looks like the cover of a school textbook. That's kind of correct. It really kind of does. Well, definitely get the Soviets done here tonight. Maybe not the Germans. We'll see. I think there might have been some some inspiration from the legendary Press Dogs games from SPI, as Stigler points out. So yeah, these are, all this stuff is Poulter himself gets out of allegedly, my information says, gets out of wargaming in 1991, but I think that some of these games date after that, so I don't know who else was running 3W if Poulter left in 1991, or if that's just the sell by date of S&T. Yeah, not an incredibly elaborate set of maps, but then again, Ancients battles were often on open plains on purpose, so that is why GBOH, for example, gets away with doing a lot of games on the plain map. Stacking Limit says, good game redone by Worthington in an upgrade, Dawn of Battle. This is the first I'm hearing that Dawn of Battle is an upgrade of these old 3W titles. That doesn't mean that's not true. It's just the first I've heard of that. Re-implemented by Ancient Battles Deluxe, and then Ancient Battles Deluxe is re-implemented by Dawn of Battle by Mike Nagel. So okay, I had not traced that particular lineage, but Jason W says that it was a complete redesign. The mechanics are totally different, which I'm prepared to believe. Dawn of Battle looks promising. I will say that there are some people who didn't like it, but maybe my tastes differ from theirs. I don't know. But then again, I do have all the GBOH stuff. So it's not like I'm dying for Ancients action that I'm going to run this stuff down. I don't think that's really necessary. Stigler, of course, hates Ancients, I believe was the actual direct quote here. All right. So moving on from the Ancients lineage and Dawn of Battle, we have Decision at Kasserine, Rommel's Last Chance. Now, this, of course, was. Do we have a. So there's a new version of this. This is interesting. I don't know that I realized this. All right. So Decision at Kasserine, 1983 in the Wargamer magazine. And Wargamer magazine is another 3W organ. Okay. So they are publishing, and it's another wargaming magazine in which there is a war game in each issue. I think it's every issue anyway. I don't know. I've only ever owned one or two issues of the Wargamer at any time, and I don't think I have any of them right now. I owned more issues of Command, NS and T, but that's not rare. We might. I may do a clickbait title that is this because it would be fun. So the best of stuff Stigler hates. Coming next week. I don't know that the butt cushion's doing that much good. Meandering Mike says the last couple of years didn't have games, which I think sounds right. So in any case, I think we got a Roger McGowan cover here, which has been reused in one of the two subsequent editions. Now, this is a pretty well-regarded game, and it's like number 4 or something like that on the list of 3W games, according to BGG. That gets first redone as this game, Kasserine, Rommel's Battle for Tunisia. And to what extent there is evolution in the various versions of this game, I don't know, but they're all Vance von Borey's designs, right? And then this is 2001. Everybody's probably seen this on a shelf, and it's got a different but really very nice Roger. I take that to be a Roger McGowan cover. I really like that cover. And then in 2020, we got a newer edition by Compass Games, and the art design here is by Ilya Kudryashov, who's doing some really nice work, by the way, with companies such as Hollandspiel and Compass. The new edition of a game we're going to talk about, The Last Gamble, is Ilya Kudryashov's map, and boy, it's nice looking. This artist has also done work for Hollandspiel, if I didn't mention that. Once again, Vance von Borey's design. This is pretty well regarded, and the map here, I think, is a pretty nice looking map. You wouldn't find this does not look totally alien, per what you would expect out of a GMT edition of this map. And if you look at, as far as I know, this is still available from Compass as well. I could be wrong about that. And the counters are cleanly designed, which is good. I don't know who did the counters off the top of my head. This is the front, so not really telling me. It could be Ilya Kudryashov. That'd be nice. Might be the same show, in fact. So, considering that North Africa 41 just showed up here, and you will see an unboxing of it, in fact, this Thursday, assuming it gets edited in time. In either case, you should see it fairly soon. I'm not under pressure because it's not like they gave me a copy. I bought it myself. So, but it looks nice, and you'll see an unboxing of it sooner rather than later. Do I still clip counters that are perfectly cut with no nibs? Yes, I do. I prefer the rounded corners. So these are punching pretty clean. There's dog ears, but they're pretty small. Very seldom is there truly no nibs, but not never. But yes, I will absolutely do that. Now, the exception is like Hollandspiel counters or Blue Panther counters, where they're also incredibly thick. I did some experimentation, and with the deluxe clipper, I actually was able to get those to clip, but it's totally not worth your time. Um, it should be. It should be included, but Kadesh is not in this list. I had that at one point as well. I don't think I ever played it, however. All right, so Decision of Kasserine, well-regarded game with a quite long history, and the fact that it's stuck around for quite a while should tell you something. Um, this is an example of one of the fairly decent number of Napoleonic games the 3W did. Many in S&T, and they had at least one or two different series of Napoleonic games happening at in S&T, and maybe there was crossover into the Wargamer too. That's possible. Um, the that one did not catch. Ah, there we go. Had to wipe it a little bit. Stukajo mentions that Ilya Kudryashov even designed a game, Siege of Ismail, for Hollandspiel, which I have not taken a look at. Maybe that's worth a look. Stigler says he does not hate DVG, but he's not interested in anything they produce. I feel pretty similarly about DVG and probably Lock and Load as well. Lock and Load does have a couple of things on the horizon that I am highly interested in, meaning Glory and Empire, pretty much. And that's just because I feel incredibly crowded in that tactical space that that Lock and Load has established a large presence in. And I don't feel sufficiently interested in the almost exclusively solitaire space that DVG has established itself in. I think DVG has some really good looking games, but really the only thing I feel like I need from them that I can think of off the top of my head is Field Commander Napoleon, which I have. So, all right. So this is Napoleon at Eylau. And it is the Battle of Eylau, which is an interesting and reasonably well-known battle. And I picked this one more or less because we're going to get 37 Eylau games over the next 12 months or so. I'm not surprised because I think there is some level of coordination happening here. But given the number of Eylau games that we're going to see in the immediate future, I'm not terribly, I'm a little surprised, in tongue-in-cheek, I suppose, that Marshall Enterprises isn't doing Eylau themselves because everybody else is doing Eylau this year. So I'm not really sure what is going on with this because I have not ordered anything from them, so have had no occasion to inquire. But I guess there's been some issues on the communications front with Lock and Load in recent months. And I'm not talking about Trial of Strength, which seems to have just gone AWOL. I do appear to be getting some. Well, maybe that's it. Never mind. All right. To be honest about Warfighter Fantasy is like the most interesting thing for me that DVG does. Because I don't have to judge it on wargame merits, right? I am not interested in Warfighter at all. I understand it's good. Lots of folks like it and good for them. I have no interest in it. But Warfighter Fantasy. Now, I will note that I was not sufficiently interested to actually buy it. But it looks kind of fun. I don't know. So Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. Mo, thanks for coming by. Gang's all here tonight, folks. All right, so moving on from Napoleon and Eylau, designed by Ken Broadhurst and Colin Wheeler, whose names do not ring an immediate bell for me. Spin over here a little bit. There we go. All right, here is another wargamer, and this is another one that I picked off the list. I am also curious. I've heard some reports of people having trouble clipping the Glorious Chance counters. But other than that, I haven't seen a whole lot of traffic on it, even though I think it is a very interesting looking design. In any case, no trumpets, no drums. This is a Mark McLaughlin game. His name will come up again here, folks. And a T. Larry Twohy um, design. And this is it's a game about Vietnam, and it's apparently the whole war. But if we look at it, we'll see that as opposed to say, great zoom in, guys. As opposed to say, Hearts and Minds, or the other one, the Compass, is redone relatively recently. This is a hex map, and actually, this actually looks fairly interesting. Now, this was redone much later by One Small Step. Now, the original design here is, Wargamer magazine, so take that for what it's worth, 1982. But then the One Small Step version comes out in 2016, and this thing's, I'm pretty sure this is out of print already. I've only got one thing from One Small Step, and I've taken a look at one other thing from One Small Step, which we will also get to later on. And so the one that I have is the new War and Peace, which is very nice. Also a Mark McLaughlin design. And the one I've looked at is 30 Years War, which we'll come to in a bit. So this is another one where this was well regarded enough that somebody else picked it up much later. There's a whole bunch of scenarios. I can't vouch for whether so this is a really difficult topic. Okay, so and for a whole host of reasons. One, there is a sensitivity factor here. There are folks who are simply not comfortable with a game about the Vietnam conflict. In addition to that, and I actually think this is the bigger deal, it is a really difficult game to simulate. And in at some level, it may be better simulated under the auspices of something like Coin than it would be in a Hex Encounter war game. Now, that said, there's a couple examples of Hex Encounter war games that deal with the entire Vietnam War. This is one. Another one is, of course, the legendary Nick Karp Victory Games Vietnam 1965 to 75. And I'm not sure that War of the Rat covered the entire conflict up to that point. It might have. There's probably one or two other ones. And I don't know anything about what Ray Weiss is up to. Ray Weiss is the guy that runs CSL Conflict Simulations Limited. And other than, he seemed to be having some personal issues, like serious personal issues. And, as far as that goes, he has my support, but I don't have necessarily a lot to say about anything that he's doing. Perry Sparopoulos. So lots of, well, I don't want to say lots, but there have been some Vietnam operational games. This is true. Silver Bayonet is basically Vietnam operational, and the upcoming a Hot Dry Season, which I thought I did. I've mentioned this, but the Hot Dry Season has moved from Revolution Games to Snafu. I'm not sure if it's Snafu Store or Snafu Press or Snafu Industry or whatever, but it's the folks that run Snafu Store, and the designer Pat Mullen seems very happy with that move. It's going to get published probably looking at sometime next year. Year of the Rat was 1972. That's a John Prados design, and I've never looked at it closely, but it was a very bold. We talked about this with Danny Parker and John Butterfield last week, actually. But the it's a very bold choice to make a game about the Vietnam War while the Vietnam War is still ongoing, right? Which is the case with War of the Rat or Year of the Rat. Snafu Designs, and they are a Spanish company. The Snafu Store end of it, I think, is just kind of their retail wing, but they've published several games at this point, and this is going to be their their biggest game to date, I believe. And it's terrific. Go watch the playthrough video that I did. So Mo says that Vietnam is best covered as either an operational battle campaign or series of tactical simulations. Vietnam as a whole is incredibly difficult to make into a good game. Yes, that this is a completely true. I don't know about best simulated or best covered because that's going to depend on what I, as a wargamer, want out of that game. But certainly the second half of this covers the first half of this statement because it is incredibly difficult to make into a good game. And again, maybe it's better to take a non-traditional approach and go with something like coin rather than going with something like trying to duplicate Nick Carp's Vietnam, which is something that is very difficult to do, to say the least. And there have not been many attempts to do so. This No Trumpets, No Drums actually predates Nick Carp's Vietnam. I will point that out. The Victor Games Vietnam came out in 87 or 80, 86, 87, 88, something like that. Um, so I'm actually pretty curious to see this game. Now, this map is the One Small Step version, I'm reasonably sure. Yeah. This is the original 3W version, and I believe the word I would use to describe this map is wah. It's really intense. Really intense. So the One Small Step version is, let's say a little more up to modern graphical standards. There's no listed graphic designer on that, and probably I wouldn't. I'm kind of glad because I don't want to embarrass that person. Um, all right, so moving on from No Trumpets, No Drums. Now, 3W is an interesting company for a number of reasons that we've already talked about. But one of the other sort of oddball things about 3W is that they a number of their games ended up. Where the fuck did this go? A number of their games ended up with other publishers later on, and then there we go. Somehow we managed to conflate green with gray. Um, a number of their games ended up with other publishers later on. And a number of other publishers' earlier games ended up with 3W, and this is one of those. This is Duel for Kharkov, which I'm not sure what the deal is with the foreign language cover, but this is Conflict Simulations. But this is originally from People's Wargames. This is a Jack Rady design, I believe, with a co-designer. Um, COSI doesn't look like they did a whole lot, with David Bolt as the co-designer here. And I gotta say, this is a very nice. I don't know if it's a very nice cover, but I appreciate the graphic design of this cover. It is not overdone. It sort of has this stark look to it. I think it's, they could probably done better with the picture and in terms of graphic processing, but it's still interesting. Um, and yes, this is so well, let me get back to let me do this comment. So Jeff, are we talking about the One Small Step version or the Wargamer magazine version? Because the One Small Step version looks pretty good to me in the image. The Wargamer magazine version, I hope it looks better in person. So Perfidious Albion says that Duel for Kharkov looks really good, but then it's a Jack Rady design. So for those who don't know, People's War Games, which I believe existed for a relatively brief period in the late 70s and early 80s, did maybe a dozen games or so. Jack Rady was basically the fella behind People's War Games. And if you're thinking, the name People's War Games seems to be making a political statement, you are right. And it is making the exact political statement that you might suspect that it has. We're not going to get into that here tonight. But that is a thing that one, might want to be aware of. So all that said, and Jack's political, which he has not been shy about particularly, political stance is aside. He is an expert on the east front of World War II, and there's nobody doubts that. And has done some really very nice games on the east front of World War II. We need some baggies here. So bearing all that in mind, Duel for Kharkov is one of them, and it's not the last one that we'll get to tonight. I have, although I wasn't super duper impressed with the physical production quality on the remake of Corson Pocket, I have no doubt that there's a good game there because the original had that. And at no point are the credentials of Jack Rady as a designer and expert on East Front subject matter in at all in question. So this is the battle for third and fourth Kharkov. The I'm going to pull up a map image here, but I don't necessarily know. I don't know if this is the 3W map or not, but it sure looks like it might be. You know what? I have not had this conversation, so um I do not feel qualified to participate in that discussion here tonight. Let me put it that way. So um in any event, this map does look like does it say now this is the COSI slash 3W version. So there's several different versions of this. And if we look at the versions, we're going to see the original Duel for Kharkov, which I think I'm going to pull up because although okay. Well, it's not as good as the Course on Pocket cover. Let me put it that way. But it's it's not a horrific looking piece of graphic design. Uh, but then there's the later version, this 3W English second version, second edition. That's this, and it says conflict simulations on it. So I don't know if this was a co-production or whatever, but it's a decent looking game for its era. Let me put it that way. And last I was in there, and it's been a long time. There was a copy of this edition of this on the shelf at the Soldiery in Columbus. But that might have been the time before I was in there when I observed that they had no war games remaining other than 7 copies of Twilight Struggle. Um, so there's that. Um, And as Perfidious Albion mentions, generally speaking, 3W games are they're not super easy to find in a store for obvious reasons. But the where'd the black ones go? Did I bag these already? I clearly bagged these already. Well, I'm being an adult here somehow. We'll just put this in here. No, I'm staring right at it. In any case, I do think that a Jack Rady game on the East Front, he did some games on other topics as well, is worth a look. Now, that's not a final judgment, but definitely, I think anything Rady has to say about the East Front of World War II is worth a look. He is one of the foremost experts within the hobby on this topic. So moving on from Duel for Kharkov. Here is our other element from Mark McLaughlin and 3W Holy Roman Empire. Now, this was also redone by One Small Step in a very this is looks like an area-based map. I think the remake might have made it a point-to-point map. Is that correct? Or am I full of it? That's plausible. Nope, still an area map. So this is the updated version of this. It's got a really nice cover. It's in a 3-inch box. It looks really good, and I almost bought it one year at Origins, but it was expensive at the time. And at the time, I was like, "Oh, that's $125." I don't know. Now that seems naive and quaint. So Nordic Maelstrom, I think this is great. I think this is a great way to enhance immersion into your war game in general. And even better is if the game system actually builds that in for you, as a number of Dean Essig designs might, as well as some other games as well. And apparently, this is not super duper easy to get. Let's take a quick look at that. 150 bucks. I don't know. No copies here in the US. However, the Wargamer magazine version goes for quite cheap, $15 in VG condition on BGG, as far as I can tell at the moment. So that's not bad. Jeff Beeler says it's similar to Kingmaker. Um, I think that's true, and apparently there are cards as well, which doesn't mean, but might imply a kinship with Kingmaker. We are done with the Soviets. This is true too. This is fair. Yeah, so this is an interesting looking game. Interesting looking subject. 30 Years War, essentially. A war that it took Germany, Central Europe, a very long time to recover from. I should point out. Uh, you know, depending on who you talk to, potentially centuries to recover from this 30 years of really intense conflict, which was to some extent religiously motivated. But I think it's a oversimplification and overly reductive to say that the 30 Years War was just about um, Protestants versus Catholics. I think there's political ambitions that are at play that then leverage the religious conflict to attempt to take advantage of it. So interesting looking game. Next up is a game we talked about on our interview with Joe Miranda. This is Joe Miranda's first published design with John Burt. This is Nicaragua, a Nicaraguan revolution in Central America. And I believe I could be misremembering this. I'm happy to be corrected, but I think Brian Train has mentioned this as a as an inspiration or as an early influence on his thinking as far as designing games about insurgencies in general. Another thing that I did, by the way, was I finally fixed the boom arm on the microphone. There's a big divot in this friggin' cardboard IKEA desk. Eventually, I got to get a new desk. I don't really need a new desk. I just need to replace the top. So pretty much, I just need a piece of wood and sand it and stain it, and maybe cut a hole in it for cords, and I'll be all set. Stigler, I think this is great to know and understand completely what eras you're interested in and what eras you're not. And it's nice to be able to concentrate, to be able to concentrate on game systems and periods. I try to do this, and I am usually not successful. I am interested in entirely too many periods. But in general, the modern period is one that I have mostly successfully stayed away from. Unfortunately, the American War of Independence is a topic I have become more interested in lately. And why is that? Is that because of the Revolutions podcast season on the American Revolution? Maybe. There's certainly some interesting history there. But no, there was something else that I saw or read or something that made me more interested in the American War of Independence. So, in any case, Nicaragua. We've talked about this already. It's an interesting looking game. I feel like if you are interested in the topic directly, as in the Nicaraguan Revolution, that um, this may be the only game in town, literally. But there's also that next coin combo pack that I think might cover this as well. And I'd probably rather play this particular topic in coin. And I have not pre-ordered that particular game. The Guerrilla Generation, is that what it's called? All right. Next up is Hitler's Last Gamble with a kind of interesting picture of Patton on the cover, coming to the rescue, of course, because that's what Patton said he did. But in any case, this is the Danny Parker Classic. Danny Parker is one of our foremost experts on the topic of the Battle of the Bulge. This is a really well-regarded game. Apparently, this was also Dean Essig's first cartography job as a wargame map artist. And maybe you could, if I hadn't known that, I'm not sure I would have been able to divine that from looking at this map. But knowing that, I think you can kind of see a sort of a similarity between, the dean that drew this thing and the dean that drew, say, Smolensk or whatever. Um, so Just highlighting Nordic Maelstrom's comment, just in case anybody else has opinions to share on this. The Battles of the American Revolution series is very well regarded. I've got the tri-pack, and there's a tri-pack 2 coming. There's also Liberty or Death, which I have a pretty high opinion of. And there's also Washington's War, which I talked about in the Mark Herman show, which is not one of my top 10 personal Mark Herman favorites, but I don't think it's a bad game. It's just that I'm not that big a fan of it. This has now been turned into The Last Gamble, and it will be forthcoming from Compass Games. And I don't know that I have a date on this, but it kind of sounds like early next year. I don't know if Mo knows anything, and I doubt Mo is at liberty to say if he does. I am very much looking forward to that. I see no particular reason to run down the 3W edition at this point. The new edition is going to be a substantial rework, and I feel like Danny intends for it to be his kind of final word on this subject, a sort of magnum opus, sort of his Pacific War, if you will. It's going to be relatively complicated. I cannot speak to the complexity of the old version. Not a terrible cover by any means, though. So that's interesting. Now here we got a tie bomb, but this is kind of a classic. Tomorrow the World. This is the sort of classic tie bomba-esque. 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 I like that. Scenario in which the Axis powers have won World War II, and now the Germans and the Japanese are fighting it out. Um, um, yeah, basically, the Ultimate Nightmare game postulates an alternate scenario for the events leading up to World War II. Roosevelt is successfully assassinated. Churchill is killed in action earlier in his career, and the West never pulls out of the Great Depression. The German-Japanese alliance sweeps to power and divides the world. In 1948, they turn on each other. Do we have a picture of the entire map here? Doesn't look like we do. That's fairly annoying. In any case, second edition. Yeah, there was a second edition, and Ty has revisited this concept several times. Um, uh, for those who are going a sequel, Tomorrow the World Volume 2, The Air War for Command Magazine Japan. Holy cow. Released in 2022. And we have basic, wow, okay. Leave it to the Japanese to kind of knock it out of the park on the graphic design. I think this graphic design is very striking. So Ty, when are you bringing this to our shores? Because this looks interesting. For those who are into this kind of scenario, and I'm really not, to be honest. I'm impressed with this map in the Command Magazine Japan version. That sounds pretty. That looks really neat. So this is the one I'm not seeing. There's only 40 pictures of this thing. Oh, here it is. Full map from Cyberboard. And naturally, this is actually a pretty nice scan, to be honest. So this looks point to point. You've got Japanese America and German America, and then you've got this sort of dividing line through Central Asia between German occupied all kinds of stuff and Japanese occupied all kinds of stuff. I think this is it's alt history, right? So it's a little unfair to criticize its credibility as an alternate um uh history scenario, because it presupposes that the Allies never had a real chance in World War II, rather than assuming that it was a contest, which it was historically, and that the Allies simply did not come out on top as they did historically. Man in the High Castle is a somewhat more straightforward alt history in which there's a World War II that happens more or less as expected, as far as I can tell. And then some years later, the book happens, and or the series from Amazon happens. I really liked what I saw of the Amazon series, but man, it's really heavy going, and I have not finished it. So Tomorrow the World, interesting Ty Bamba esque topic, and Tomorrow the World Volume 2. Now, I'll also mention that this is a re-implemented by per BGG, and sometimes BGG is just full of it on this kind of stuff. But in this case, I don't think they are. This is Triumph of the Will. This is kind of a reimagining around a polar map, a very coarse-grained polar map of the entire planet, and it's basically the same type of thing. Germany and Japan have won World War II. 3 years after that victory in 1948, they square up against each other in a final battle for world domination. So if you're into this kind of thing, once again, the Thai is the guy. You are presumably a close follower of Thai Bombay if you are involved in alt history gaming. Um, yes, I agree with Stigler here. The idea of them taking Hawaii, I don't think is completely ludicrous. But there is a reason they did not actually attempt to do so too. But West Coast of the US, yeah, no. I mean, I agree with that. The scenario is very far fetched. Let me put it that way. So, NATO nukes and Nazis. That's his mantra, right? All right. Here's another interesting one. This is Africa Oriental, and I have this one. And this is the war for World War II. The war, well, okay. So this is the East African campaign of 1940 to 41. It does not cover the pre-World War II or kickoff to World War II, if you like, campaign in East Africa between Italy and Ethiopia. This is a sort of Europa family game in that the system is tied fairly closely to Europa. The map scale is quite different, and I'm not sure to what extent that creates issues, given that the scale issues are the primary problem of Europa. Um, so the movie the novel was written by Philip K. Dick of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep fame. And it's an interesting book. The show takes things in a somewhat different direction that is in the book, but not explored to the same extent. Um, Let me put it that way. So this is a fairly interesting game. Again, once again, I don't know if we have an image of the entire map, but I do have this. And other than being, I think on one map, and now you later got this in the actual Europa system if you bought Wavell's War, but then that's different. So this is an entire huge can of worms here. It's a legitimate question though. Do these alt Germany versus Japan games account for the fact that Germany may have had atomic weapons by 48? I personally, having read some things about this, feel like Germany was on enough of the wrong track in their atomic weapons program without, major intervention. Like now we don't have 5 parallel atomic weapons programs running. Uh, that 1948 is an optimistic date for a German atomic bomb. That said, one could contrive an alt history in which I think you can accelerate that timeline. So Africa Oriental, reasonably interesting, kind of historical kind of wargaming historical artifact. In the sense that it's a Europa family game. It's not Europa proper for a number of reasons. One, it wasn't published by those people, but I believe it was published with their okay, and the scale's quite different. So, um, eh, I would probably rather try to play this than play this same campaign out in Wavell's War. But that doesn't mean I am incredibly enthusiastic about either thing, to say the least. It's definitely the same style as the Europa maps, broadly speaking. Frankly, I think the GDW Europa maps are more attractive than this. Even the early ones. Well, not the early ones, but the late 70s, early 80s ones. So Fire in the East era. But the graphics on those are not radically better than this. Honestly, the graphics don't really start to get better for Europa. And I'm talking map graphics until just into the GRD era, in my opinion. Same topic. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think so. Actually, so all right, moving on to this East Front Battles 1. Now, this is not listed as a series by our friends at Board Game Geek, but there is an East Front Battles 2. Now, there's an interesting history going on here. One, do I have these behind me? I might. I do. So here we have East Front Battles 1. This is a Vance von Bory's design. And it is 4 scenarios: Siege of Kiev. There's a campaign game. Rundstedt attacks. There's an optional deployment scenario, and it's 3 maps. It's a 1-inch box, folks. 3 maps and what's probably 2 counter sheets. Now, this original Vance von Bory's design was intended to kick off a series. That series did not materialize. What we got instead was a volume 2. This is volume 2, Spires of the Kremlin, by a different designer, Joe Youst, who takes over the series here. Now, I think that, and this is 3 maps and 1,000 counters, and it's in a 1-inch box. So, yay, 3W. This is a fairly handsome game, though, to be honest about it. And it's possible. It doesn't say that on the back, but I suspect that Joe Youst did the maps, and I think Joe Youst is a terrific map artist. So these are fairly interesting designs that one can take, I think, credibly as precursors to the later von Bory's East Front series from GMT, the Barbarossa Army Group, North Source Center, Typhoon, those games. I think the follow-up, in fact, to this game was he went to GMT to do Typhoon. That may not have been the next game, but I believe it's the, and Marty basically says this. So yeah, this is, I think this is completely accurate. It's definitely a precursor. It's got some of the same ideas in it, just at a glance. I think this is true. And Spires of the Kremlin, I'll point out, covers Operation Typhoon. But I'm especially interested in Operation Typhoon. I think it's a really interesting East Front situation that could have gone either way. It is like a legitimate tipping point in the progress of the East Front as a conflict, and depending on the framing of the game, let's pull out Spires of the Kremlin. And this is upside down. Does this tell me exactly when it takes place? Yes. The game covers the Axis attacks toward Moscow during October and December 1941 and runs through January 15th, 1942. So let's satisfy my OCD by turning this upside down so I don't keep doing that. So that's basically Operation Typhoon. You might start it in September instead of October, but either way. So good topic. I think a reasonably credible design, but one might also credibly say that it's probably better to just go with the GMT Typhoon. But GMT's Typhoon is like 25 years old now, and I don't know if they're ever going to get to a revision of that. I hope that they do, but the logical place to do that would have been to put it in with Army Group Center, and they didn't do that. So this is it turns out not correct. There was the third bomb was not built, but the core was ready to go. And they said the day the Japanese, or the day before the Japanese surrendered, the Los Alamos team said they needed about a week to get another bomb. Now they got to put the bomb together. You got to get the bomb out there. So that's not zero time. But it's not like it would have been 4 months till the next bomb. So that is my understanding anyway. So Perfidious Albion says, if you have Operation Typhoon, you could in theory use the EFS rules to play it out. It is Yes. So the GMT Typhoon has the most integration problems with the later games in the series. Um, I saw this too, and I'd be delighted if Joe decided to do that. I think that'd be pretty cool. I'd be very interested in that. And I don't feel like it's terribly difficult to get Compass on board. You got to fight through their pipeline just like everybody else's. And I guess I might as well, since we have already talked about it, cover Spires of the Kremlin right here. A, a 1994 design or release, anyway, from Joe Youst and 3W. Now, I went to some trouble. Now, this is one of those things where I went to some trouble to run down a copy of Spires of the Kremlin, but part of that is that I was unwilling to pay a ridiculous price for Spires of the Kremlin. I think I got it for about $30, which I felt like was a pretty decent, pretty decent price. This East Front Battles 1, Blitzkrieg in the South, got thrown in on a pay it forward or a spot. I might have bought something, I forget, but this was like a throwaway. Somebody threw it in the box, but then I was glad to take it. All right, so this is Aachen. This is a co-design between Winston Hamilton and Jack Grady, the late Winston Hamilton, who was at one point president of Gamma and who ran, as far as I could tell, was definitely one of the partners of, and I think the fellow who actually ran Games Research and Design. That was the people who were doing Europa product after Game Designers Workshop. So if we look at versions on this, we're going to find this not incredibly highly sought after People's War Games version of this. It actually covers pretty good. This is not one of the really well-regarded games out of People's War Games, however. This is what you think it is: September to October 1944 in and around Aachen. Map-wise, it is nothing special. I have personally only handled the People's War Games version of this, so the 3W version might look a little better, but I doubt it looks that much. Bleh. Is that the 3W version? Boy, that's ugly. I don't know. So interesting, once again, interesting cover. This is some kind of co-production with COSI of a Jack Grady People's War Games. Not exactly classic, but an interesting game from them. Now, on the subject of interesting looking East Front games, is this one, Army Group Center. This is a game by Masahiro Yamazaki, Japanese designer, and somebody was posting some playthrough stuff on Instagram some years ago on this, and this actually looks pretty interesting. I don't know to what extent this is reflected in more recent Yamazaki designs. For example, pulling him up as a designer here, we're going to see that things like Red Star Rising from MMP are I think this is a Yamazaki design with development by Adam Starkweather. I believe that's an accurate statement. But these are pretty well regarded games, and certainly the cover's nice. And so I don't know to what extent there's a sort of continuity between this game, a 1993 release from 3W. Was this originally released in Japan? No, it was originally, according to BGG. There's a later Japanese version, this Six Angles version, which I assume is a reference to the six interior angles of the hexagon, the most perfect shape. But I might have seen this too. This is Jonathan Townsend, Army Group Center gameplay. This might be what I was thinking of. Maybe it was an Instagram, but this looks fairly interesting. All right. So Meandering Mike says the Compass pipeline flows at the speed of the designers and developers. GMTs tends to flow at the speed of the art department and the printers. Yeah, Mike, you were there, I think, for our interview with Bill Thomas, and Bill's got like several months worth of releases just in the warehouse waiting, and they're releasing them at a specified cadence. Okay, so to some extent, I think this is true, but there's also an additional not bottleneck per se because the product continues to flow. And if Bill's making that methodology work, then I think that's great because A, he reprints stuff on a regular basis, and B, there's a constant flow of products, and we don't have like a 3-month drought, which is something that's happened for other companies, right? Um, Roger Hemsath says the air system in Army Group Center is really the best East Front air system he's played. That's very interesting. This is a very interesting. Yeah, I have Bill. I have this sense as well. Art department feels like a general euphemism for getting close, but not there yet. I have the sense that that's true. I mean, a lot of times you'll see in the art department, and it's like a reprint that has no art changes. Or at least minimal art changes, and it sits there for a year and a half. So I do think that is a bit of a catch-all category, and it merely being in the art department is maybe not super duper descriptive. William Aarons says that we are all waiting for the GMT Army Group North and Army Group Center. We already have Army Group Center, by the way. You're thinking Army Group South. Typhoon would be the logical next game to be upgraded, hopefully by the end. I mean, I'm all for this. Now, they did say toward the end of the development cycle, by they, I mean Vance's team, um, of Army Group Center Second Edition, that the following games should be a lot faster because they've already ironed out everything that they needed to iron out for that first volume. And we have seen an acceleration on Army Group North, which will be the next one. I don't want to say acceleration. I will say movement on Army Group North. So I think it feels likely that we'll see the new edition of Army Group North next year. And if that's true, if we see the new edition of Army Group North in 2024, then maybe we'll see the new version of Army Group South in 2026 and the new version of Typhoon in 2028. I think that is a not inconceivable order of events. I'd be all for that if it happens. All right, so moving on from that, we have a game that was mentioned earlier, Royalists and Roundheads. Now, this is a Rob Markham game, and this is English Civil War battles, and this is 4 battles. What battles? Does it say what battles? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's irritating. So I don't know what 4 battles off the top of my head, but there's also like other games in the series. There's Royalists and Roundheads 2 and 3, and there was a whole bunch of other games set in other assorted periods that are apparently based on this system, including this thing, which, I don't know jack about this, but it's a Rob Markham design, and Rob Markham's a fairly interesting designer. And again, I'm not really sure that this is the right cover for this, but it's a cool cover. So quad game by Rob Markham, and this on the front says Antioch, Ascalon, Acre, and Arsuf. So 4 reasonably interesting battles and or sieges from the Crusades, which is a period I'm also interested in and have several games on. So there's a whole series here. And they had a Crusades 2, which one of these things, yeah, this is it. At first, it's a postage stamp size. This is an Angus McBride cover. Angus McBride did a lot of work for Osprey, for one thing, doing historical stuff, but he also did a lot of work with Tolkien. Not with Tolkien, but on Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth type stuff. So I have a tremendous fondness for Angus McBride as an artist. Unfortunately, it's the late Angus McBride. These are pretty interesting. And if you are interested in this period, like specifically interested in the English Civil War, and I'm really not, I think these are probably worth looking up. This was a pretty popular series at the time, and even though its BGG rating is fairly low, I don't think, especially from 3W, I don't feel like that's necessarily an indicator of anything. There's 3 of them here, so clearly it wasn't a complete dog. Somebody was buying them. All right, Rob, thanks. Eric, thanks so much. Much appreciated. I don't really have any news. Well, I do sort of have news. I am going to do another designy show, episode of this show in October sometime. So that's not something I want to be doing all the time because a lot of people said, "Oh, that was boring." So hopefully I'll be making more Order of Battle progress. I have made some. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't have anything shiny to show off. I got a spreadsheet. But I have more or less got the counter design nailed down, more subject to final tweaks. And there might be mechanical changes that then roll over to the counters. That's possible too. But I don't have news. Thank you for the super chat. Much appreciated. The support is much appreciated. And there will be news soon. I don't want to have to like give you updates every week because I mean it's gonna be friggin' 5 years before the thing's ready to go. So Keith Rocco's really, really good, by the way. So I'm just pointing that out. All right, so moving on. Here's another one that I saw quite a bit. Michael Scott Smith, Run Silent, Run Deep. Um, Really pretty cool cover, I think we have to say. Exciting, fast-paced game recreating tactical submarine actions in World War II. This always looked fairly noodle. Jesus Christ, these graphics are terrible. Um, the This always looked complicated to me, but I never really looked at it particularly closely, and maybe it's not. Based on this summation here, um, have they? I mean, we're going to see reprints of these sooner or later. I think certainly Silent Victory. The topic here, Brian Foley, is the best. Well, not the best of a publisher spotlight on 3W. Um, And if we actually go to 3W and look at their list, we're going to find that their last game this is bullshit. Hold on. Their last game, Scratch One Flat Top, which did pass through my hands at one point from 1995, and then their first game runs back to a remake of very unhelpful. This might have been their first one, Marston Moore. Yeah, copyright simulation game. This is why I didn't try and run down their first release. I really do. I'm not the world's most dedicated solitaire player because I don't have to be. But um, as solitaire games go, I think the Hunters and the Silent Victory are really very good. I mean, this is I don't Jeff Beeler. I don't think this is weird because they did a lot of magazine games. Now, for years, I thought this was a game designer's workshop title because this feels like a game designer's workshop cover, and it's not. It's a 3W cover. Light Division, Flashpoint in the Gulf, um, the near future. After years of simmering, Middle East has exploded into conflict. Modern conflict in the Middle East. Is there a scale affiliated? God, these are limey. These looks like battalions. Wow, that's a really bright colors, man. I don't know if that's being accented by the photography or what. Because these aren't nearly the same. Pretty decent looking counters, actually. So yeah, if you're interested in this subject, this is actually, I think, a reasonably. I've heard some people say good things about this game. Let me put it that way. Now, this is a Joe Belkowski design too, so that's to me that right there is kind of worth a look, right? That Joe Belkowski did it. Now, graphically, I think this game is nothing special. I would be a little surprised. I don't see an autograph on this cover. Now, according to BGG, artists Leslie Freeland, Larry Hoffman, and Stella Rhodes. This looks to me like one of the Keith brothers on this cover. If anybody has a copy of this and you can find out who did the box cover, I would be very curious. Because this to me looks like something, and that's why I feel like this looks like a GDW game. At least looking at the box. I've never looked at the inside of the gorgeous lime green counters. Previously, and as you can see, the back is a sort of a seafoam green and a lurid pink. So the color choices on here are stark. Let's put it that way. So the Central Front series, I believe Mr. Stigler may have something to say about this particular entry in this series. So the Central Front series is a sort of venerable SPI classic. Now there's 5 games listed here, okay? The first of which is Hofgap never came out in the magazine, so I can't tell whether Hofgap or Fifth Core came out first. I want to say it was Fifth Core. So uh, SPW did North German Plain and Donau Front, and I believe they don't quite work with the rest of the series. Ragnar Rich says Stella Rhodes on the box art. Thank you very much for looking that up. Looks like it's Keith brothers, one either William H. Keith Jr. or Andrew J. Andrew Keith. That's what it looked like to me. That's why I felt like it was because they were GDW mainstays in both the wargaming side and the I want to say Traveler side, but it could have been they. I think they did stuff for their other RPGs as well. So this is a modern conflict series that has some really interesting mechanics, as originated by Jim Dunnigan. Jeff Anderson, thanks for stopping by. That's awesome. So Stigler says that Donau Front uses a different system than the original Central Front, but I believe you can get some kind of a refit to enable you to play Donau Front with the original system. So I think that's what Stigler is alluding to here. You might need to go to Concept World for that, but it might be on BGG as well. Neil Badkey says that these S3W versions were an insult to the S&T version. Well, they're not as highly regarded as the three from S&T, let me put it that way, which were Fifth Core, Hofgap, and BAOR. Nordic Maelstrom spent the Napoleon's Last Gamble spent the entire month of June playing the entire 100 Days campaign. This sounds great. I think that's terrific, and I like that system a lot. So you can actually there'll be a resign button, and if the module doesn't have a solo mode or a like an observer mode that you can control all the stuff, you can sign out as whoever you're signed in as and sign in as the other side. It's a little bit of a hassle, but that is the most trouble you have to go through. I picked up a copy of Fifth Core in the last year or so because I really want. It's not that I'm interested in the topic particularly. I'm not uninterested in this topic, but I'm overdone on this topic. But I really kind of wanted to see this system. So the Donau Front and North German Plain are the two that the 3W did that are not well regarded in the series. So this is Tide of Fortune. This is the West War series. We've talked about this series before. This is use a similar system from To the Far Shore and the Italian campaign series, which appeared in S&T later than this, I believe. Now, I have that entire Italian campaign series, and it looks like there's some interesting ideas in it, and it looks half developed, as is not really shocking for the games of the period. So I don't really feel like I need to pick this up or To the Far Shore, which is Normandy, which I'm more interested in that than this campaign. Although this is an interesting campaign. September and October Allied campaign in northern Belgium and the Low Countries, culminating with the Arnhem operation. I don't think that makes sense. Considering that the Arnhem operation launches in mid-September and is basically completely kaput within 10 days or so. So I don't know that timeline makes any sense, but I will assume that's back of the box bullshit and that the game is actually probably fine in that respect. I have not actually gotten to play this yet. It's on the to-do list, but it ain't at the top of the to-do list. I'm going to get to let's do let's do Mr. Lincoln's War next. All right. So this is a 2-game series by designer Mark McLaughlin, which together cover the entire American Civil War at a more or less high operational level. Army of the Potomac covers the Eastern Theater, and Army of the Tennessee covers the Western Theater. And we've got some really rather nice, these came as boxed games. I had both of them back in the day. The system will remind you of the system from War and Peace, okay? I think this is actually a fairly serviceable design. And if you put the whole thing together, you've got what looks like the Sun Tzu box map, which is like a huge chunk of the American Civil War going clear out to the Mississippi. You're not getting a lot of trans-Mississippi action here, but, you got to give something up, too. This is a fairly interesting game. However, that said, the actual physical production quality of these two games were among the worst I have ever seen. Um, Greatly overshadowing any merits that the game might have had as a game system. I would kind of like to see these come back in a more reasonable edition, say with paper maps. Um, these are each one map, so it'd be a two map game basically with probably three or four counter sheets. That's not enormous. I think there's a lot of potential here. Let me put it that way. Um, when I get scared and bitchy about mounted maps of extremely low quality, these are why. The quality of these mounted maps was the worst I have ever seen, and I do have some of those one piece Avalon Hill maps. Those are bad. These were worse. These are truly dreadful quality maps. And I mean, they're not even attractive, right? These are fairly primitive looking maps, even by the standards of 1983. Both SPI and GDW were doing nicer looking maps than this. That said, the art on the maps is basically functional. It was the physical, like mounting, that was really terrible. All right, so last up, timing is great here. We have East Wind Rain. This is another Mark McLaughlin game, and according to BGG, there is a Chris Bruga co-design credit on this. Artist Jan French Johns and Kevin Zucker, which is interesting. Now, this is a Pacific War game, and you'll notice from this map that the scale is fairly coarse. But there are some people that liked this game. I've also heard some fairly bad things about it. This has never passed through my hands. Um, Interesting scale. And I believe this is coming out in a new edition from Compass Games. Unless I've misheard that, which certainly stranger things have occurred. There's two maps here. They look like 6-panel maps, so not quite full size, but interesting looking game. And I'd be curious to have a closer look at it. But probably with a new version on the horizon, probably not curious enough to go run a copy down for $30 ain't bad, actually. These aren't incredibly hard to get. So, and the box ain't bad either. Now, hold on here, because we've got multiple versions. There is a 3W version that according to BGG, at least, they look exactly the same. East Wind Rain from 3W, and then a year later from Task Force Games. The Task Force Games one is the one I think I've actually looked at. Vlad C. First of all, welcome to the stream. For 3W, he's laid campaigns for Guadalcanal, Longlands, and Henderson Field, has land combat and naval combat on Guadalcanal and Iron Bottom Sound, can be played separately or together. That's very interesting, actually. I know a friend of mine is working on a game on Guadalcanal and is trying to integrate both the land and sea stuff. And I wonder if he knows about this. So very interesting. This is one package, or is this two games that you can integrate together? Well, obviously not. I hope not. But other than that, the covers look basically the same, at least according to well, okay, so that's the same cover. I think a pretty good cover. Although that water / flag does kind of look like it was done in crayon, doesn't it? Or is made of melted wax. I don't know. I like this cover. I'm not sure this cover holds up to a repeated staring a staring contest. Let me put it that way. Ugh. No, thank you. I mean, this would be very ambitious. Don't get me wrong, but and I will certainly take pictures of it and be happy to put them on the internet. But I'm not going to play any of that. All right, so okay, so John, this is very good question, actually. John Longshore says, if you get Pacific War from GMT specifically to play Guadalcanal, is it okay? Are we talking 5 counter? So I think there's a couple different Guadalcanal scenarios. I think there's a battle scenario and a campaign scenario. And I think the campaign scenario is what you'd end up getting the most play out of long term. And it is sort of takes a step back from that. There's really not much to the land battle, right? if you land some Japanese Marines on the island, then they'll fight it out in land combat. But they're fighting against American Marines, which means they're very difficult to dislodge. So you got to get really super duper lucky to actually do that. But there's a whole naval air component that's happening alongside that landing that the Guadalcanal campaign scenario actually does a really good job at. I think Mark Herman says that's his favorite scenario. Is it Guadalcanal or Coral Sea? It might be one or the other. So I thought I had some water down here, but I only got whiskey. Now, my copy of Fifth Core is missing a rule book. And when I emailed the guy, it was like a game specific rules in it, but no central front rules. I emailed the guy, said, "Hey, it's missing the series rules." And he said, "Oh, I'll send you that." I'm like, "Okay, cool." Because I could just go find it online and just print it myself, and that's fine. I don't care about it for collectability purposes. He sent me a second copy of the game specific rules. So I'm like, well, shit, I gotta find it anyway. And I didn't want to hassle him anymore than that. This is true, but like I said, there's a whole bunch of context around it that Pacific War does cover. It's not just if you're just in it for the fight on the island, then yeah, Pacific War is not the right game. John Longshore, thank you so much appreciated. Um, I skipped this because it is in the same sort of general vein as that, and I didn't feel like I needed to cover multiple of those titles, other than the fact that a Tomorrow the World 2 came out in Japan, which I literally found out as we were looking at it. So anyway, I'm gonna close this and we can get back to, there we go, back to this. And so yeah, that's exactly right. So there's some interesting naval stuff happening. Jeff Beeler, thank you so much appreciated. And you can actually like see the super chats too, which is also nice. And no O'Connor, Farsees, Kenev, Rourke's, and Sideshow. I couldn't cover all this stuff. Farsees actually was the last thing to get cut off the list as I was preparing the list. Um, so so there's that. And Rourke's did not make my prospective list. However, I'd say that among folks of a certain generation who really fondly remember, say the movie Zulu, that their Rourke's Drift game might end up being the definitive Rourke's Drift game. They did a lot of games, right? I mean, if we look at their like just number of games that they did, there's 168 games listed here. Now not all of those are 3W originals. But there were a decent number of 3W originals, right? Remember they ran the magazine for 4 years or something like that. Does that sound right? Look at my notes. Magazine from looks like 3 years on the magazine. Ugh. Um, I don't know if it was monthly or bi-monthly at the time. That's a decent number of issues. So that's a decent number of games. And they did a lot of games in like 1-inch boxes and stuff like that. This is another one of those things where, as Joe Perez says, I end up with more 3W games than I thought I had, right? I'm like, I've only got like 2 or 3. And I like look at the list. I'm like, yeah, I've got like 15. I've got a decent number of 3W games. Now, um, this is totally fair. That is that supposed to cut off like that? How's that working? We need to fix that. Well, that ain't it. Does this work? I think the comment is really long, and that's the problem with that. We have, let's see if we can fix this. There we go. I think we fixed it. Let's Well, fixed is possibly not the exact word I was looking for. Um, the of course the American torpedoes for quite a while when the war in the Pacific first got started was a huge issue actually. So yes, I agree that the Last Gamble from Compass does look really good. So I think this is true. However, bear in mind that GDW was actually around for a really long time. They were around from 73 or 74 all the way to 97 or so. So that's a good 25 years where 3W's output, despite the allegedly starting at, is about 10 years or so is when their like peak is. So that's a shit. That's a factor. Gary McClellan was digging around and found Shot and Shell. Um, their Napoleon series, the one on Asper Nestling, was really good. That's a fascinating battle, of course. It's one of my favorite Napoleonic battles. Let's pull this out. Keep an eye on the chat here. Okay. Nordic Maelstrom just won Valley Battles for the Shenandoah and the supplement new for under $60. Unless you're getting cornholed on shipping, that's a really good price. I mean, even at full price plus shipping, the box itself is an amazing value. So I mean, this has been worse, right? Right? I think. Let's make one final adjustment to this thing. Yeah, that more or less works. $43 plus $13. Oh yeah, that's unbeatable, man. That's an outstanding price. Be very happy with that. Plus, it's a fabulous, again, a fabulous package. So right now, I want to get the North Africa 41 unboxing, but it does require some editing. I will try and get that unboxing out on Thursday. Um, Also on Thursday, we will have the show with Dan. That is at 7:30 Eastern time, until 7:30 to 8:30 Eastern time, and our guest will be Mike Nagel. There'll be some very interesting things to talk about with Mr. Nagel, considering that he has some very interesting and quite cool designs. Yeah, that sucks. That's terrible. All right, there we go. Okay. Um, So we're going to continue monkeying with this screen feature thing, and I may do a special window with the chat. So William Boardman, it's funny that you should mention this. I want to get it done on Thursday. I've already started doing prep for the video, but it don't be shocked to see a traveler video next Tuesday. You're not going to see one tomorrow. All the effort that would be going into that is going into the next video, and I guess I probably shouldn't be coy about it. There was an interview in, I want to say, last October with Todd Howard, who is I forget what his actual title is, but he is the creative dude at Bethesda Game Studios. Okay, and he was asked what are your inspirations for Starfield, right? And this is before the big reveal had taken place and all that. And this went around, right? This made news on the internet in Traveler circles. To everybody's great shock, Traveler was specifically mentioned as as an inspiration. And in a later or earlier interview somewhere, apparently Bethesda actually had the rights to do a Traveler video game at one point, and they lost them fairly quickly. And I should ask Mark Miller about that. He might actually know what the details may have been about that. Boy, that'd have been something else. But I think that while you have to look at this holistically and say there's no one inspiration, Certainly there appears to be very good alignment between what we see in Starfield and Traveler. And that is what the video will be about. So the idea is going to be to make that video on Labor Day and release it on Tuesday, because I will have played Starfield by hopefully quite a bit by then. And at some point, I'll also mention, since Nordic Maelstrom is mentioning this, um, at some point we will be doing a Traveler game. Some point in this context means whenever one of my two RPG games is done, because I cannot attach another time slot. That simply I've already got a shortage of time slots. So we won't be doing that, but as soon as one of those two things wraps up, and it's likely to be the Shadowrun game first, um, as soon as one of those two things wraps up, then I'm going to probably run something. It will be online, and there's I would say at least 75% chance that it's going to be Traveler. So bear that in mind. We're probably months away, but there you go. Rim Expeditions is pretty interesting. I will agree with you there. I would love to see this too. The Anglo-Dutch Wars are a really very interesting topic that has seen basically zero attention. So yes, absolutely. Give me some Anglo-Dutch War stuff. Mm. So you could go. I'm not gonna like. There you go. This is an outstanding choice. There are excellent reasons to think that to feel exactly this way. Um, so uh, so on the one hand, so at this point in my life, okay, I guess I'll talk about this for. Oh shit, we're over. I'll talk about this for at least 2 minutes. At this point in my life, I don't consider myself a particularly avid video gamer. Okay. I just don't really have the time to dedicate to it. And a lot of these games are big time sinks. And I would rather spend my, precious gaming hours doing other stuff. And one of those things is running this channel, right? So there's like a whole bunch of things that I just would rather dedicate the time to. Um, However, that said, when it came out, I bought Skyrim on release day. Okay. And again, 11, 11, 11. And, playing it overnight was, I think it was a midnight buy. I think I was waiting in line at midnight at Best Buy to buy it, believe it or not. That is the only time I've ever done that to buy something. And other than like midnight movies or something like that, generally that's not something that I'm willing to do. Um, and it was rough that first night. I'm not positive that I actually got to play it on the first night. I might have gone and sacked out for several hours because there were like serious UI problems. And there was like a day one patch and all that. I want to say that's the last like regular video game that I like got super invested in the launch of. Now there were some MMOs that I jumped in on day one, including Age of Conan, which I played a fair amount of early, including oh god, what else? Warhammer Online. I played early until the problem with Warhammer Online was it was really fun for 10 levels, and then it was less fun for 10 levels, and then it was not fun for the remaining 20 levels. So there were probably a couple other MMORPGs that I got in on like right away and participated. And it's an interesting experience participating in sort of that launch rush of an MMORPG. We're in an interesting period right now in that there's been a couple of really highly regarded video games that have already come out this year. There has been, even just in the last 4 or 5 weeks, we've seen Baldur's Gate 3 release, and it has been getting absolutely ravingly good reviews. It is supposed to be terrific. Now, I believe there's a co-op mode, but it's basically a single player game. So in that sense, I don't feel like I need to rush. I'll pick up Baldur's Gate 3 sooner or later, and I'm sure it'll be good. But I don't need it right now. But the last game, like actual video game that's not an MMORPG that I got really sucked into was Skyrim. Okay, so it's been 12, 13 years. And even if this is only Skyrim in space, I probably would be happy with that. But what this looks like is Skyrim in Traveler. And I am all over that. I mean, that's kind of what I wanted in an Elite Dangerous, and Elite Dangerous is just sort of this bland and soulless, but technically impressive simulation that just didn't have anything to keep me there. So, all right, folks, we are honestly, I think it was broken after level 10, to be honest. It's just that after level 30, it becomes absolutely transparent and you can no longer evade that. There is a private server or emulator or something like that going on. I did not really get into any of the Fallout games. One of the warm-up games that I fiddled with in the last month, trying to prepare myself for Starfield, was Fallout 4. And I probably played it for a total of 3 or 4 hours. And it's not awful, but I'm not really loving it. Yes, this is true. Great idea. It's just that the problem was that they sucked everybody out of the world into the private instances, and no one was in the world anymore except for the Zerg, the rolling Zerg. It went out of its way to go from fortress to fortress, capturing the fortress, and avoid the enemy Zerg that was doing the same thing right behind them or in front of them. So I would estimate over the three different editions of Skyrim, is it four? It might be 4 editions of Skyrim that I have probably put 300 or 400 hours in. All three of those together. The least in the VR version, because oh boy, I got nauseous very quickly. So I'm pretty excited about it. I also picked up Command Modern Operations in a recent sale somewhere. So that's waiting for me as well. But I'm going to be doing a video on the sort of inspiration for Starfield Traveler that is going to show up on this channel. And again, the plan is next Tuesday, not tomorrow, but next Tuesday. And then the actual stream, I took a poll. We'll see what the poll turns out to be, but it kind of looks like it's either going to be on the digital channel, or it's going to be on the digital channel, or it's going to be on both, or it's going to be on the digital channel, but I'll do like a short saying, hey, go check out the digital channel. So yes, you'll be seeing some Starfield videos. Do remember that if you want to see me stream the thing, show up at 6 p.m. on Friday, so that I will be encouraged to continue doing it. Like I said, if like 5 or 7 people or something like that show up for this thing, I'll be delighted. And we'll keep doing that. Those are good starter numbers for Twitch. For YouTube, it's slightly less impressive. All right, Carl, very much. Thanks very much for the assistance. There is a huge playlist on YouTube of tutorials for Command Modern Operations. All right, folks, I'm sure there are other streams and goodies for you to hop over to right now. We're going to check that. In fact, nobody else is live right now, so never mind. But in any case, we're going to let you go here tonight. And we're going to continue fooling with this technology behind the scenes, and eventually we'll transition. Next couple of weeks, there's going to be the big giveaway, so you probably want to set your alarms for next week, is all I'm saying. So everybody, have a great night. Don't forget to thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. Thank you, patrons, for supporting the channel. It means a lot, and it's incredibly helpful. So thank you, and everybody have a great night. We'll see you next week, if not Thursday.